Welcome to the presentation of a lecture from Gnostic Radio, a free public service from the Gnostic tradition of Samael en Vior. Gnosis is the root wisdom of all the world's great religions. Gnosis is a universal teaching of practical science, whose goal is absolute liberation from suffering and the complete development of the human being. This lecture is one of many available by free download or podcast. The hundreds of hours of lectures range in topic and complexity in order to address the many needs of humanity. Each Saturday, Gnostic Radio broadcasts live. The live lecture is accompanied by an online chat, allowing listeners to read additional explanations related to the lecture and providing an opportunity to ask questions of the speaker. To learn how to participate or tune into our continuous web broadcast, visit our website for more information at gnosticradio.org. Gnostic Radio is made possible by the financial support of listeners like you. For more information or to make a donation, visit our website at gnosticradio.org. Now, with heartfelt wishes for the end of suffering for all creatures, we begin the lecture. May all beings be happy. Is one who, having accurately analyzed all actions of body, speech, and mind, always acts for the benefit of self and others. This is a quote from a very important scripture in Buddhism called Ratnavali, or the Precious Garland. And it comes from the Madhyamaka school, which was founded by Nagarjuna in India many centuries ago. And Nagarjuna was a great master of Indian Buddhism, primarily known for his mastery at explaining the doctrine of the Buddha, specifically related to the most profound aspect of Buddhism, which is shunyata, or the emptiness. What we in Gnosis call the absolute. The name Nagarjuna is actually very interesting. It means king of Nagas. And a Naga is a serpent. And all the great masters from all traditions have always called themselves serpents. Quetzalcoatl, Wotan. Even Jesus said, "Be as wise as serpents." So Nagarjuna, as a king of serpents, was a great Indian Buddhist master who wrote this famous scripture called Precious Garland. And it was a letter that he wrote to a student who also happened to be a king. And this passage summarizes Buddhism, and it summarizes Gnosis. And really, it summarizes any genuine religion, any true path to the divine. Because really, to return back to our divine root, we have to embody that divinity. We have to become a perfect vessel of that divine force, which, of course, in different religions is known with different names. The Christians call it Christ. The Aztecs called it Quetzalcoatl. The Buddhists have many names for that essential force of divinity that lies at the basis of all existence. The most fundamental name they have is shunyata, or the emptiness, or patitya samutpada. These are names that refer to a very deep and profound function of nature, and whose manifested element, or active energy, in Sanskrit is called bodhicitta. Bodhicitta can be translated in many ways. Usually it's translated as awakening mind. But equally accurate would be to say cognizant heart, or intelligent heart, awakened heart. Bodhicitta is a very profound word. Bodhicitta is the central tenet of Mahayana and Tantrayana Buddhism, the highest aspects of Buddhism. And without understanding bodhicitta, you can't understand those aspects of Buddhism. And in fact, without understanding bodhicitta, you can't understand gnosis. The Gnostic tradition is a Mahayana and Tantrayana tradition. 100%. And you have to have a clear, comprehensive understanding of why gnosis exists and what it's for. Otherwise, you will not get it, and you'll waste your time. And this quote summarizes what gnosis is for, what its point of view is, what its goal, what its direction is. It is the elaboration of wisdom, the embodiment of wisdom. For us to embody wisdom, to incarnate wisdom, not wisdom as a concept, and not wisdom as a theory or as a nice attribute, but wisdom as a living, vibrating, radiating energy. That in Sanskrit is called bodhicitta. In Hebrew, wisdom is chokmah. Chokmah is the second sephira on the tree of life. Chokmah is the radiation of Keter, the being of the being, the Ancient of Days. Chokmah is the perfect light, the wisdom of God. It is a kind of divine intelligence that is beyond intellect. It is a divine intelligence that is abstract, beyond conception, and that has its central chief characteristic as love as sacrifice. We see this virtue, love as sacrifice, very rarely on this planet. We can see a glimmer of it in the sacrifices that a parent makes for a child. This is a terrestrial reflection of love as sacrifice. The vibration or the force of chokmah. Chokmah, wisdom, is bodhicitta. But that bodhicitta, that type of knowledge, that type of compassion, is not blind. It is not indifferent. It is not foolish. It is the love of God. It is a demanding love. It is a rigorous expression of a divine energy, a divine force, a divine intelligence. Gnosis, Mahayana Buddhism, Tantrayana, these traditions have as their very purpose to exist, to guide a soul to become a perfect vessel of that light. Now, to be a vessel, one must first be empty. In order to receive something, there has to be a space for that something to enter. And when we look inside of ourselves, do we have room? Do we have space in our mind and heart to bring that energy and to transmit that energy to others? And this is the central question that we have to ask ourselves. Are we a fit vessel for Christ, for bodhicitta? Are we prepared? The answer is very clearly a resounding no. We are not. The reason is because we have filled our vessel with I, me, myself. We as a vessel at this moment exist to sustain and feed our desires. And this is why we are not yet fit vessels for Christ. So Gnosis, which is a Mahayana tradition, provides to us a science, a method to become a fit vessel, to become empty, so that we can be filled with light to help others. I know many of us like to think that we have light and that we're good people. And we like to adorn ourselves with virtues and dress ourselves and show ourselves to others as being spiritual people. But we have to be honest with ourselves. We have to be sincere. We have to be extremely clear. What do we see when we look into our mind? We see ego, pride, envy, jealousy, resentment, fear. A true vessel of God looks within and sees the light, sees God. So until we reach that stage, we have to work very hard to remove all the obscurations that are in our mind. And this is the value of this quote from Nagarjuna. He states unequivocally that a wise person is someone who has accurately analyzed all their actions. That's the first part of this quote. Speaking for myself, I would say that I'm not such a person, because I see in myself many actions of my body and my speech and my mind that do not benefit myself, truly speaking, and that do not benefit others. And thus, it's beholden upon me to comprehend this statement well and to actualize it in my daily life, to do my best to fulfill it. That's a long work. So, in today's lecture, in order to prepare the students who are attending the retreat, and in order to help all of us put our feet on the ground and know how to walk in this tradition, we will talk about how do we actually eliminate the ego? How do we actually do it? Not just to talk about it and theorize it, not just to have the good intentions, but to actually do it. If you've read the books of Samael and Vior, if you've studied the Gnostic lectures, the teachings, if you've attended any school, you've heard again and again that we have to eliminate the ego, the I, that the defects that we have in our psyche have to be removed so that our consciousness can be freed and awakened. We know this. If you've not heard these concepts and teachings before, this might seem odd, this idea of eliminating the I. And the question often arises, if you eliminate the I, what's left? Isn't it just emptiness, nothingness, death, non-existence? Well, the answer is actually yes and no. But the answer comes in levels, because we have levels of understanding. If we were going to speak from the highest philosophical level of Mahayana and Tantrayana, we would say that there is no self, such as we see it. this concept of self is a lie. It's false. There is neither self nor non-self. This is basically what Nagarjuna taught brilliantly. And this is the whole basis of Madhyamaka Buddhism, that school of Buddhist teachings that originated in India. It's the doctrine of the Buddha, Anatman. The doctrine of no self, which teaches there is no self, but there is a self. And the intellect can't comprehend this. The intellect wants definitive answer, concrete result. But reality isn't like that. And to get into the details of how that philosophy works and what it means truly requires many years of meditation. Reading books will never explain it to you. Listening to lectures and discourses will never help you understand it fully. You may be able to get the concept to some degree. But to really understand the doctrine of emptiness and what it means, you have to meditate. You have to experience the void, the emptiness, shunyata. This is the only way you can fully grasp what it means when the Buddha says, there is no soul, there is no Atman, there is no self. But then he's saying that you, self, have to work on yourself. And this contradiction to our intellect and to our very low-level mind makes no sense. Nonetheless, it's a reality. It's a reality that only the consciousness can grasp. And this is the essential point. This quote says, accurately analyzed all actions of body, speech, and mind. That's relatively easy to understand intellectually. Many people have read quotes like this and said, okay, I understand he's talking about analyzing body, speech, and mind. But have you thought about, if you're analyzing body, speech, and mind, who is analyzing them? Have you thought about that? Can your mind really analyze your mind? Can your body analyze your body? Can your speech analyze your speech? Obviously not. This is the essential point. We are not body. We are not speech. We are not mind. We are something else. And we never realize it. We read quotes like this. We study religion. We study mysticism. We study spirituality. We study the soul and the spirit and the body. We study the three brains. We study the astral body and the mental body. And we never realize that we aren't any of those things. Right here, right now, in this instant, you are not the body. You are not the mind. You are the capacity to perceive. Pure perception. That is the root of being. That pure perception is not I. Look into that. How do you see? Not through your eyes, but further back. Not through your ears, further back than that. Not through sensations in your body, not through taste, not through touch. Further back. Not through thought, not through emotion. What in you is perceiving? And have you ever once turned that perception back into itself? There's a great secret hidden here. Look back into that which is looking. This is the greatest clue of meditation you will ever hear. It is the core secret of Mahamudra, of Dzogchen,
of all the highest teachings of meditation. It is the methodless method. It is extremely difficult and also the most simple. Look back into that which is looking. Can you find a self? When you extract consciousness from every sense, what remains? When you extract attention from the flow of thought, from the flow of emotion, from the flow of sensation, what remains? Perception is still occurring, but what perceives and how? What I'm pointing at for you is our consciousness. What in Gnosis we call the essence. It takes a lot of willpower for us to develop awareness of our consciousness, because our consciousness is asleep. And it may feel exhausting to bring the consciousness to present awareness and to direct it, to consciously observe. In the beginning, it's a very rigorous, strong, tiring effort. And it should be such. If your spirituality is very flaccid, very weak, very ephemeral, you just sort of float along, you're working in the wrong way. Real spiritual development does not occur by just being on autopilot. Awakening the consciousness requires enormous effort. It takes all of your energy. Because the consciousness that we have is trapped, it's asleep. That's why all of the myths that describe this describe the unbelievable heroic efforts that the heroes have to make to save the maiden, to dominate the monster. So much sacrifice, so much work, so much danger, so much risk. Those aren't just pretty fairy tales. They reflect a living, vibrating truth. Our essence, our consciousness, is asleep, and to awaken it requires every ounce of strength we have. And that awakening doesn't come through the mind, it doesn't come through the body, it doesn't come through speech. It doesn't come through intentions, or the way we dress, or the way we talk, or the books we read. It comes through right now, paying attention. But most of all, being awake and aware of the consciousness itself. It's one thing to pay attention to what's going on outside of us. This is good. We need that. We have to pay attention to our environment. And it's another thing to pay attention to what's happening in the mind. This is also important, to watch our thoughts, to watch our feelings, to observe sensation and how we react to those. But really, we need to be aware of the consciousness. The consciousness, how we perceive. How. Not just the fact of perception, but how we're perceiving. This is a super critical thing for us to observe. And this is because every action of body, speech, and mind requires consciousness. But is that consciousness modified? Or is it free? And this is what we usually don't know. Usually because we're not paying attention. We're usually so overwhelmed with the surging chaos of thoughts, worries, concerns, fears, desires. That we have no self-cognizance in the midst of it. We're like a log tossed on a stormy sea. That stormy sea is our mind. And we're tossed about by all the surging wills in our mind. I have to get to work on time. I have to turn this paper in. I have to make this phone call. I have to send these emails. What about this person? What's he saying about me? A surging chaos. To just go along with that, to just be tossed around by that, is to allow oneself to go down the drain. Because really, everything on this planet, all of the energy, all of the forces are going down the drain. It's not hard to see it. To go against that current, you can't just sit back and relax. You can't just lie back on your log and let the current take you. If you want to do that, it's your will. But are you sure of where the current is going? This current of life, this current of humanity? To incarnate wisdom, to become truly wise, we have to change. And change does not come by sitting back. Change comes through work. And not merely a little bit of effort, not just a few minutes a day, but a continual effort. Think about this example. If you're shipwrecked, grabbing onto your log in life, which is your little situation of circumstances in your life, that which keeps you afloat, your family, your job, your situation, which of course for all of us, at any instant we could lose it, because nothing is stable right now. At any instant, everything we have can be taken away. And if you don't believe me, ask somebody in the Gulf of Mexico. Ask somebody in Israel. Ask somebody in Palestine. Ask somebody in Tibet. In El Salvador. In Guatemala. They'll tell you. It happens like that. Everything's gone. None of us have any assurance that what we have now will be here tomorrow. We need to be serious. And if we're on that little raft of our life and the current is taking us, how are you going to swim out of that whirlpool? With all of that energy that's pulling all of us, how will you get out of it? Are you really going to sit on your log and read a book and think that you're going to get out? Or sit on your log and put on a religious t-shirt that says, I believe in this and that? Or because you see someone on another log nearby that believes the same thing and you guys feel good that you found each other, that will save you? It won't. None of these things will save you. You have to swim with all of your might, with every ounce of energy that you have. You have to fight the current of life. That current is outside and it's inside. And that current, to fight it, the way to fight it is to analyze yourself. To analyze your mind. To analyze your heart. To change. It sounds desperate because it is. Our situation truly is desperate. And as painful as it is to look at our own life and to feel that and see that, that really isn't a Mahayana perspective. It really isn't a Gnostic point of view, because it's very selfish. Let's all open our eyes. Instead of looking at the little log that we're clutching onto with so much attachment and fear, Open your eyes and look around. And you'll see that you're surrounded by millions upon millions of people in the same situation. This is truly terrifying, horrifying. And if you're really sincere, you will burst into tears. Because all of those other people are the people you have loved and who have loved you. They are your mothers and fathers, your sons and daughters, your brothers and sisters, your wives and husbands. And they are all dying. We are all dying. This is what Gnosis exists for, is a way to change that. We put it into stark terms because that is our reality. And we put it into stark terms not to encourage fear, not to make us feel desperate and afraid and worried, but to give us a chance to change it. One of the most fundamental rules, laws, that manages the law of cause and effect is that any effect is greater than the cause that produced it. This is an extremely profound law. When we take an action, any action, the effect of that action will be greater than the cause. If you speak a word into someone's ear, if you speak a word in a room, the energy that it took to say that is very small. But the ripple of that vibration through all of those who hear it is immeasurable. The same is true when we seriously take the reins of our spiritual life and we work seriously in our spiritual life. It seems as though all that energy that's cascading down into the whirlpool, sucking the entire planet into the underworld, is too much. And there are many who give up. And they give up precisely because they become identified with fear. They become identified with shame, with terror. They become overwhelmed. They defeat themselves. They feel, it's too much for me. I can't handle it. It's too hard. I can't do it. This is all the ego convincing them and taking them out of the work. It doesn't need to happen. When you really understand the law of karma, then you should have great faith. The law of karma is a law. It isn't a belief. It's a law you can demonstrate at any time. Test it. Work with it. When you seriously work in your spiritual life, you will prove to yourself that it is possible to reach complete liberation. It is possible. It can be done. But you have to invest energy into it. It can't be a temporary or part-time job. It has to be full-time. That's how much it takes. And each little investment of energy we make is greater than that energy. Each time that we meditate, each time that we restrain a harmful action and we turn it into something beneficial, we create a huge impact. Not just for ourselves, but for others. Huge. And if we don't realize it, it's because we haven't done it. Do it. Just try one thing. Give sincerely. Something needed. The power of giving is one of the greatest powers in the universe. The power of generosity. That power is unimaginable, how much it can do. And that's why all the great masters exemplify that, the power of sacrifice. That is the power of hokmah, love as sacrifice, the power of giving, the power of generosity. It is a generosity of spirit, a generosity of heart. And that generosity is most accurately summarized in thinking of others before yourself. That is the essence of bodhicitta. That's why generosity is the first paramita, the first perfection. It is the most fundamental basis of real spirituality, to think of others. That is to have a generous spirit. We only think of ourselves. And when it's convenient, we might think of somebody else. If it's convenient to us. That's not sacrifice. The true spirit of generosity is to constantly think of others first. Especially in regard to our psychological work, our spiritual work. We talk a lot about eliminating the ego, but we usually think about eliminating the ego in an egotistical way. We think, I want to eliminate my ego so I can reach liberation for me. It's very egotistical. That's why it's part of the Shravakayana path. That way of thinking is not in Mahayana and Tantrayana. It's not in the higher schools. You can't get into those teachings in the internal worlds until that way of thinking is gone from you. To take the higher aspects, you spontaneously have to be at that stage where you think of others first. Where you start to realize, you know what? I really need to eliminate my pride because it's hurting other people. I really need to eliminate my lust because it's hurting other people. This anger in me is hurting other people. And when that is your first spontaneous impulse, you're entering into the Mahayana level. That's the true Mahayana attitude. Mahayana means greater vehicle. It's a higher level of spiritual training. The one that thinks that way is essence. Your mind cannot think like that because your mind is selfish. Even when the mind does charity and is generous, it's always in the end for itself. We give donations and we go and do volunteer work. And on the outside, we look like we're great saints and helping humanity, but really we're fattening up our pride. That's not real generosity. It's ego. True generosity doesn't concern itself with itself. True generosity is love as sacrifice. Giving because it must be given at any cost. That is generosity. That is true compassion. So the Gnostic method, the Gnostic teaching, helps us to take this quote and put it into action. And the way we do that is quite simple in concept. It has three aspects. We usually talk about them as birth, death, and sacrifice. And these are the three factors you find in any religion. But I want to expand on those to make them more experienceable, to make them something that we can taste and touch in our day-to-day life. And the first one, the most important, is to stop any action of negativity. That's the first. So when we are performing this quote to accurately analyze our actions of body, speech, and mind, to act for the benefit of self and others, the first most important way for us to do that is to stop performing negative actions. That means negative actions towards ourselves or other people. And to understand what negative actions are, we have to study the teaching. We have to study our religion. You can really study any religion to grasp this concept. And this is the fundamental basis of any religion. It's that first foundational level that the Buddhists call Shravakayana. It's the level where we learn ethics. What we should do, what we should not do. And these are pretty simple. Don't kill. Don't steal. Don't lie. Don't abuse your sexual energy. Eliminate pride. Eliminate anger. Stop these behaviors that are selfish. So we have the 10 Commandments in the Western traditions. We have the Vinaya. We have Pratimoksha in the Eastern traditions. And there are many lists and analyses of the different actions that are harmful and beneficial. You can study any of those and they will all help you. Most importantly, you have to study your heart. We all have our own idiosyncrasies. We all have things that we think are virtues and we think are our good qualities that are actually completely egotistical. And no book's going to teach you that. You'll only see that in yourself in action, in your daily life. And if you take this teaching seriously, you will see it. You will learn about it because your innermost will show you. If you think you're in situations in your life that are painful, that are hard for you, it's because your innermost is putting you there to teach you about yourself. The same way we train a puppy dog to not go to the bathroom in the wrong place and we put its nose, say, don't go here. Well, your being's doing that with you. Putting you in situations to say, you made this mess. You made this mess on the floor. Don't do that. See how unpleasant it is? See how painful it is? See how much you suffer? Don't do that. But we always curse God. We blame everything. Why is this always happening to me? Why do I have to suffer? Why are these problems? Why is he doing that? Why is she doing that? We don't realize the reason why is because we made it. But we don't want to see our own culpability. To be a serious spiritual practitioner, that's the first thing you look for in any situation. How did I make this? How did I get myself in this position? What in me is suffering? That's the best question of all. To turn your perspective back instead of looking out. He's making me suffer, work's making me suffer, my wife's making me suffer. To look back and say, what in me is suffering? Because really, it's not your spouse that's making you suffer. It's your anger that's making you suffer. It's your pride that's making you suffer. If you didn't have that pride, if you didn't have that anger, their words wouldn't have meant anything. They wouldn't have affected you. Their actions wouldn't have bothered you. But because you have pride and envy and anger, you get bothered a lot. So that's the shift that has to happen in us. You see, it's continual. To look back at ourselves. We have to stop harmful action. To restrain ourselves from any act of negativity. This alone can take many years. Many years. I know a lot of people like to think as soon as they get into a religion and they read the list, okay, number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, I can do all these. Cool, I'm done. I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't sleep around, so I must be on my way to heaven. Doesn't work like that. Even if you're not doing something physically, you're probably doing it in your mind. That's the hardest part. Jesus said, even if you look at a woman with lust, you've committed adultery. We break the commandments, we break the Vinaya, we break the rules. In other words, we produce causes that create harmful effects continually because that ego in us is acting. So as part of this accurate analysis, we have to continually watch our behaviors and stop ourselves from doing harmful things, not just physically, but in the mind, in the heart, through our words, through our thoughts. This requires a continual observance. We call it self-observation. Self-observation is absolutely essential, critical. Not just for a few minutes, but all the time. Some traditions call it mindfulness or watchfulness. There are many names. But the basic idea is never stop paying attention to your psychology. Don't get sucked into daydreaming, into being distracted by the outside world, by fantasizing in the inside world. Watch your mind. Because at any instant, something in you is contemplating something negative. Our teacher, Samael, said 97% of our thoughts are harmful and negative. So are we watching ourselves 90% of the time or 100% of the time? No. We're watching ourselves, if we've heard of gnosis, maybe 2%. If we're honest, how much do we really watch our mind during the day? Very small. But what about all those other thoughts and feelings that have been surging throughout the day that we didn't pay attention to? Those are all streams of energy that are creating effects. That should scare us into acting. That should be of great concern to us. We should feel the instant we realize we have lost our mindfulness of our action, we should feel as if we have just discovered a serpent in our lap. We should be that astonished. I'm not paying attention. Because truly, to lose attention is a life or death matter. When we cease paying attention, when we lose our cognizant awareness of the moment, we slip into sleep. And then all those psychological stimuli that are processing in our subconscious, unconscious, and infraconscious are creating effects. That is why our life is going down. That is why our society is sinking, because nobody's paying attention to themselves. And instead, we start acting mechanically, and we react and respond, and we're always dreaming about what someone meant and what they really said. We project all kinds of interpretations of our daily lives. Oh, when he looked at me like that, he must have felt that I was doing something bad. Or when he looked at me like that, he must have been lusting after me, and so maybe he likes me. We project so much garbage, continually replaying events and scenes in our minds, trying to interpret them, trying to analyze them, trying to change them. It's all garbage. And we let it happen. And it has consequences. And that's why we're asleep. To awaken is to watch that, to stop that, to be here and now, to be in conscious dominion of our kingdom, to control our mind, to be awake. That's the prerequisite. So we have to stop harmful action, not just physically, but psychologically. The second step is to develop full and perfect virtue. Sounds easy. So to understand that, really, we have to study the religions again. We have to study our tradition. If we come from a Christian background, we should study the teachings of Jesus. What does virtue mean from his words? If we come from a Buddhist background, we should study the teachings of the Buddha. We should study what Buddhist virtue means. And there are many ways of studying that in each tradition. Many scriptures, many references that talk about the different virtues. And there are a lot of similarities. Patience, tolerance, conscious love, humility, right? Chastity, charity. These are all virtues. We've heard all the names. But what does it mean to develop full and perfect virtue? It isn't just to have a concept. It isn't just to respect virtues. To say, yeah, I heard patience is a virtue, and I respect that, but get out of my way. I'm in a hurry. To really develop full and perfect virtue is to be it, to actualize it. And this isn't to force it on yourself. It isn't to force yourself into a rigid mold because you have to do it. It is to do it because you realize that you need to, that it's important, that it's beneficial for you and for others. That is the way to cultivate and develop virtue. So if you're angry with someone, and they're angry with you, and you're thinking, I have to be loving and forgiving, and you go to them and say, I forgive you. It doesn't work. That isn't honest. It's good as an action. That takes courage. I respect that. That does take courage. I'll give you credit for having courage. But to do it sincerely, to be honest, to say, I was wrong, sincerely, That is to develop and perfect virtue. And you can only reach that when you've comprehended it. So let's talk about that. I know I'm putting a lot of elements on the plate, but it really isn't that complicated. What I'm talking about now is comprehension. But I'm talking about comprehension in two ways: stopping negative action, adopting virtuous action. You see, liberation from suffering has 3 stages. The first stage is comprehension. The second stage is judgment. The third stage is elimination. All the Gnostics love to talk about elimination. And they all love to do different practices. Please, Divine Mother, eliminate this ego for me. But you never hear them talk about judgment and comprehension, which have to happen first before you can reach elimination. You can't eliminate something that still has your consciousness in it. So comprehension is first. And that's this quote from Nagarjuna. This is what he's talking about. A wise person is one who has accurately analyzed all their actions and always acts for the benefit of self and others. Comprehension comes from analysis of oneself. Studying the scriptures, studying religion is very important because it gives us a foundation. But comprehension, wisdom, comes from inside. And that's why the oracle at Delphi said, "Man, know thyself." This is the prerequisite. That is gnosis, self-knowledge. That self-knowledge is comprehension. Comprehension is not making a list of your defects. That would be great if it were that easy. It might take us a while to write them all down. But that isn't comprehension. Comprehension is very simple. It's when you know something. Not in your intellect, but in your heart. When you know it. If you have ever said something and seen the person who heard it react with pain, and then you felt pain and regret for saying it, that is comprehension. If you ever given a gift and saw how much gratitude that person had who received it, and you felt in your heart so much gratitude for the opportunity to give it, that is comprehension. It's not intellectual. It's emotional. It's intuitive. It's in your heart. It isn't something that you develop by making lists and by making complicated explanations of, well, pride has this and this aspect and these attributes, and it can manifest here and there. I mean, that's fine. We need to understand it in the intellect. But that isn't comprehension. Comprehension is spontaneous, and it's in the heart. It's when you feel it, you know it. Most of us here comprehend. It's a silly example. But we know if we put our hand in fire, we will get burned, and it will hurt. That's a silly example, but that is comprehension. A child doesn't know that yet. A child goes and puts their hand in it, and then they get burned, and they cry, and they're upset. But then they get it. That's comprehension. But the same thing has to happen with all of our emotions, with our thoughts, with our actions. Where we have to realize, you know what, when I do that, it hurts me. And it hurts other people. I should stop doing that. That is comprehension. So our teacher Samael told us, every day we have to comprehend lust. What does that mean? Well, first it means we have to be observing ourselves. Watching for how lust manifests in our 3 brains. In our thoughts, in our feelings, and in our impulses in our body. And it's good if we see that. If we catch ourselves looking at someone or thinking about someone, remembering something or imagining something, lustful, sexual, it's good to see that. That's the first thing. We have to observe it. We have to see it in order to understand it. Many people say, I can't understand my lust, and it's probably because they're not looking at it. If you really look deeply at lust, how it emerges, what it does, what it wants, and the consequences of that. Comprehension is not hard. It isn't. It's spontaneous. All it requires is that you look deeply at it. When you've seen how your lust has brought you into a relationship and you felt so much desire for that person and you got involved in a relationship with that person driven by all that desire, but then that relationship becomes a complete hell and you suffer in every way that you can. We all have had that experience, but none of us have comprehended it because we keep repeating it again and again. Look sincerely at that lust, at that quality, that vice that drew you into it, that desire, how it stimulates your senses, how it inflames your heart, how it spins your mind around, so that you're driven as if by another will. And then you get in that situation and you get into a big mess where everybody is suffering. If you're very sincere, if you're very observant, and you look carefully at those qualities in your body, speech, and mind, you will comprehend the danger of lust, the harm that it causes for yourself and others. You will comprehend it, and you will not repeat that mistake, because it will be conscious knowledge. Again, I'm talking about lust, not love. We always confuse them. Love is something else. What about pride? Any moment that we feel better than another person, we like that. But that's pride. It hurts us and it hurts the other person, but we haven't comprehended it. What about envy? When we want something that someone else has, we see that guy with the really nice car, and we want that. Or we see that girl with the rich husband, really handsome guy, and we want that. Or we see that billionaire that everybody loves and respects, and we want that. We've all seen those qualities in ourselves, but we haven't comprehended them. And if we sincerely analyze them, we will understand. Those are harmful desires. They're harmful because we're wanting something that isn't rightfully ours. They're harmful because they cause us to act in ways that are not according to what our innermost wants for us. So if we want that husband, we go and try to get them. If we want the money or the car, we go and try to get it. We're not listening to what God wants for us, to what our innermost needs us to do. We're listening to desire. Or if we want that social status, that job, or that title, or that position, we start to pursue that. We spend our life's blood to get that thing that we envy. Comprehension is to observe and analyze and spontaneously, intuitively understand, this is harmful. Not only to me, but to others. That's all comprehension is. It isn't complicated. It isn't hard. All it takes is sincerity and the effort to look. Now, that effort is not always easy, because there's somebody who really does not want us to acquire comprehension. And that somebody is you. The I, the me, the myself. It will do everything it can to prevent us from comprehending it. Really, in comprehension, we are comprehending the I. You remember I mentioned that the quote says we have to accurately analyze actions of body, speech, and mind. But who does the analysis? Right? Most of the time, we don't make the differentiation psychologically in ourselves. And so when we sit to comprehend, when we start to analyze our pride, we're observing our pride with pride. Right? Usually, when we're doing our Gnostic work, we're still enmeshed in the ego. We start to look at that situation and feel like, you know what, I was justified. I should have done that. I was right. That's pride. That's pride with anger. Or maybe we look at that situation and we feel like, you know, I'm such a terrible person. I'm so bad. How could I do that? And we start to punish ourselves. That is also pride. But the inverse polarity, it's shame. Defeatism, self-deprecation. That is pride. To accurately, you see it says here, accurately analyze. The ego cannot be accurate because the ego is only interested in preserving itself. If you want accurate comprehension, you have to get out of the ego. Not easy. We're 97% trapped in it. Most of our soul, most of our consciousness is trapped in the ego. So then once again, we feel hopeless. How do I get out of this situation? And a lot of students who try to meditate and learn these practices reach this stage of feeling like, I can't do it. It's hopeless. I try, and I try to observe myself, and I feel worse. And I try to meditate on my ego, and I see worse. And I'm getting worse and worse. I'm not getting better. This is good. You should feel like that. Because it shows, firstly, that you're actually starting to see the reality of your situation. People come and they say, well, I'm trying this meditation technique, and I'm watching my mind, but my mind is getting worse. It's getting more and more out of control. I'm losing hope. This is good. You're seeing the actual state of your mind. But don't lose hope. Get back in touch with that which sees. To accurately analyze, you have to make that discrimination, that distinction in yourself. Observe yourself. Not through your eyes, not through your ears, not through your touch, not through taste, not through thoughts, not through feelings, through pure perception, unmodified. That pure perception does not have your name. It does not have your family. It does not even have this body. It is beyond all of that. That pure perception is essence, consciousness, our true nature. In Sanskrit, it's called Buddhadhatu or Tathagatagarbha, different names. It is pure perception, Buddha nature. There is no I there. And again, to experience that, to understand that, cannot happen with the intellect. It has to happen through experience. It happens when you make it happen through your efforts. And it sounds contradictory, but it happens without effort. It rises on its own. Just like comprehension, it rises on its own. But you have to put yourself in the right position. If you're in your mind thinking, you're doing it the wrong way. If you're analyzing your ego and you're thinking about it, you're doing it the wrong way. If you're in your heart and you're feeling it and trying to reach out with your feelings, you're doing it the wrong way. If you're in your body, centered in sensation, and thinking that you will comprehend when you reach a certain kind of sensation, like a samadhi or like a complete absence of sensation, you're in the wrong position. You're thinking about it, you're doing it in the wrong way. These are the three brains. Some people try to comprehend the ego only through the intellect, through analyzing and thinking. Some through the heart, by reaching out with their feelings and saying, does this feel right or does it feel wrong? And some try to do it through the body, by feeling like, if I reach a certain kind of sensation, they call them samadhis or jhanas or comprehension or concentrative states. They think, if I reach this concentrative state, then I'll enter samadhi and I can comprehend my ego. This is wrong. They're basing that on sensations. Samadhi is beyond sensations. It has nothing to do with sensations. You can have a samadhi in your body while you're walking around, if you're trained to do it. Samadhi doesn't have anything to do with a particular posture, a particular mantra. It has to do with a state of consciousness. And that's why the masters are in a continual state of consciousness. And they can be talking to you and doing a few things at a time and be in a state of samadhi. Samadhi simply means an active, awake state of consciousness free of ego. That's all it is. We've all experienced it, but we've forgotten how to access it. Most of the time when we experience it, we're babies. Babies are pretty much in a continual state of samadhi until the ego starts to come and the personality starts to be developed and they start suffering. But that beauty of their smile, that beautiful expression that they have of wonderment, that is samadhi. We've all tasted that. But that's only a kindergarten level of samadhi. There are many levels. Nonetheless, comprehension doesn't come through the three brains in this way. Comprehension comes when the essence is freed from the three brains. Having said that, you can comprehend your ego right now. If your consciousness is awake, is active, and then you see in yourself the emergence of a desire, and you see that desire, and you know that that desire is harmful and wrong, that is comprehension. That's all. It's simple. When you have a moment of being fully aware of yourself, and you realize, you know what? I shouldn't do that. I shouldn't think that. That's comprehension. Now, to go deeper in comprehension, we have to meditate. The comprehensions we can reach while we're in the physical body are limited to what we can perceive in that state. We can't perceive the depths of the ego while we're here in the physical body, unless we're a very great master and have a lot of consciousness awakened. But none of us are like that. We're all beginners. That's why we learn to meditate. We learn to meditate to comprehend. We don't learn to meditate to make ourselves look spiritual or to develop powers or for people to respect us. We don't meditate because it's fun or because it makes us seem cool or mystical or mysterious. We meditate to get information. Meditation is not spacing out. It isn't daydreaming. It isn't just sitting there and watching the paint dry. It isn't sitting there and watching the dust particles float around the room. It is truly to get information, to acquire knowledge, to comprehend. That is what real meditation is. Real meditation is not concentration practices or mantras. It is not any particular posture. It is not a breathing exercise. Those are all preliminary. All of those are preparation for meditation. Real meditation is a state of consciousness in which we comprehend, we understand, we get it intuitively, emotionally, consciously. That is what meditation is for. And that's why we have to learn and practice every day. Because every day, be honest, every day we are a surging chaos of conflicting desires that are making a mess out of our lives and other lives. You're not going to change that meditating once a week. It won't happen. You're not going to change that if you just observe yourself a few minutes a week or a few minutes a day. It won't happen. There's a lot of energy at play in your mind stream. And to change the course of that mind stream takes incredible effort and a lot of discipline. But it can be done. And it doesn't take years and years and years and years to start seeing the benefits. You can start getting the benefits today. Because the instant you stop harmful actions, you stop those flows of negative energy. And the instant you adopt a virtuous action, you start setting in motion new energy. And the consequences of those actions are greater than the cause. The course of your life can change dramatically if you're serious, if you work hard. Working hard doesn't mean going to a school. It means working every day on yourself. Comprehension is the prerequisite for anything else spiritually. If you want to unite with God, you have to become like God. You have to be a fit vessel for God. If you want powers, God will give it to the one who deserves it. If you want to get out of your body and go to other planets, if you want to go talk to the angels and masters, if you want to go and have an interview with your own innermost, if you want to speak with Jesus, with Buddha, with Krishna, you can, but you have to earn it. You earn it through comprehension, through change, through setting in motion energy. If you want initiations, if you want to develop the soul, if you want to become a master, an angel, a Buddha, you can. But those things are earned. If you want to awaken the Kundalini, you can. But it has to be earned. The Kundalini is the pure intelligence of the Divine Mother. You can't trick it. You can't fool it. You can't get it just because you did 100,000 mantras or 1,000,000 mantras. That intelligence is the very intelligence of God. You can't fool it. It's not going to come into somebody who's indulging in their lust all the time. Forget about it. That energy is the power of God. It is the power to manipulate nature. It has a tremendous effect, not only on yourself, but on others. So if day to day we're going around acting like a complete fool, with our chest puffed out with pride, and we're flashing with anger and lust all the time, and we're raging with envy, why would God give more energy to that? It's not going to happen. We have to earn it. That's what the minor mysteries are about. The minor mysteries are the probationary path where we prove we are serious about changing. We are serious about eliminating our defects. We are serious about helping others. And when we go through that process, then the divinities say, okay, you passed through these 9 arcades. Let's see what you can do. We'll give you a little bit. And so they give you a little bit and see what you do with it. So be aware. Be aware. We're always being tested. If we have comprehension, real comprehension, not just to say, okay, yeah, I saw that I have pride. Yeah, I get it. I have pride. Okay. That isn't comprehension. That's intellect. Real comprehension is a feeling inside where it says, yeah, I've really got pride, and that's bad. I need to learn humility, meekness. That's sincere. If we have that, then we can move to the second stage. And that stage is called judgment. This is the second stage on the way to liberation of consciousness. Judgment is quite simple. When you have consciously and fully understood that a certain aspect of yourself is not only harmful to you, but is harmful to others, you can put it onto the defendant's bench in the court, and you can say, this one deserves to die. But that finger is pointing at yourself. Very few of us have that ability to point at ourselves and say, this one deserves to die. That self is the I, the me, the myself. We all want to make ourselves feel great. We want to take this self to heaven and be admired. But you don't enter heaven that way. You enter heaven the way John the Baptist entered, the way Jesus entered, the way Joan of Arc entered, the way all the masters entered, through death, through decapitation, where that self, that I, that ego, that we love so much is judged. That judgment begins with us. Now, this is an interesting phenomena because when we talk about the judgment of the I, we usually think about judging others. Well, he's got too much pride, and she's got too much lust. We're very good at judging others. We think we're good at it. Did you see how that guy was behaving? So much gluttony. Can you believe him? This is wrong. That's why the Bible says, judge not. That judgment should be devoted exclusively to our own mind. Any instant we catch ourselves judging another person is an instant we should quickly look back within and say, wow, look at my pride. Look at how proud I am to be judging this other person. But how many of us do that? Instead we say, oh, he's really bad and I'm clearly better than him. That's what we do. It's wrong. It's sad. Because unfortunately we see, especially in spiritual movements, that this has become a terrible infection, a disease, with this group of students accusing this other group of students, and this instructor accusing these other instructors. Poison. It's all poison. And they all feel so justified in their behaviors, and it's all wrong. Let me tell you what the true Mahayana practitioner does. The true Mahayana practitioner only utters criticism about themselves. And when discussing others, only praises them. Never criticizes. That is a true Mahayana practitioner. It's very hard to find such a person. I wish we could find more, truly. But the ego is so alive in us, it's hard to find that. And what if we're the person who's receiving the criticism? What if we're the person who's always being judged? We've all faced that situation. People are judging us, they're saying this and that, there's gossip. Everybody's talking about us because of something we did or did not do. How do we respond to that? Most of us respond in the same way. Oh yeah, well you did this and that. And what about that time when I saw you, da-da-da-da-da. We have the list of things to justify ourselves and bring everybody else down. This is also wrong. This is pride. The true response, the right response, is if you have enemies, if people are criticizing you, you know the best way to respond to them? Perfect your virtues. Speak to them, speak of them with love. Because the reality is, your enemies are doing you a great favor. We have a hard time seeing that. We want everybody to love us. But the reality is, when you have an enemy or someone's gossiping about you or criticizing you, and you feel that pain, they have just given you the most amazing gift because they have shown you your defect. It may not be the word they're saying, it's that feeling in your heart. It's that pride that's offended. It's that anger that's inflamed. They've just given you that gift. They've said, here, brother, look at what I've shown you in your heart. We should have gratitude for that. Not return with fire and thunder, blaming them and attacking them. I had an experience recently where someone very close to me for many years, for some reason that is unknown to me, suddenly began calling me terrible names, publicly. And of course I had that first reaction of, the pain in my heart and anger and pride and all that. And then I realized, you know what? That person is right. I am all those things. I felt grateful after that. I don't feel any resentment towards that person. I feel grateful. Because really, I hadn't seen that in me before that happened. And when that happened, I saw it. And I was so thankful for something that I hadn't seen. I wouldn't have seen it otherwise. I needed that to see it. So that person did me a favor. So based on that, we can understand what judgment really is. Judgment is not what a lot of us have in the mind, where it's where we, with our chest puffed out, stroll into the courts of Anubis in the temple of the law and we say, this pride deserves to die. Because we're doing that in a proud way. The judgment happens in us first. When we feel that emerge in our heart, in our mind, that quality, be it envy or jealousy or fear, and we say, you know what? That thing deserves to die. That thing is no good. And that judgment can only come when we've already comprehended that it's harmful. Right? It's obvious. Only then can we move to the third stage, which is elimination. And what is elimination? It is when our energy is freed from that. That pride or that lust or that anger or that envy or that gluttony or that greed that previously was manipulating our energy and our forces through our three brains, that previously had such a grip on us, we understood it. We comprehended it. We stopped feeding it. We grasped that it was harmful. We broke its ties over us, its grip. And then we judged it. And we were able to see every time that thing shows its face, we say, no, you're not allowed in my temple. You pride, you fear, you envy, get out. You deserve to die. Then and only then, when we have complete control, when no matter what the test is that comes to us, whether physically or psychologically in the internal worlds, we always reject, we always judge that I and do not allow it to control us. Do you see how hard that is? To reach that level of comprehension that judgment actually happens? Because physically we might get tested. If it's an ego of pride, for example, we might have, if we're a very boastful, proud person, we may have someone come along and give us a lot of praise. And we feel all that, yeah, you're right. I'm good. I deserve it. We may not think it or say it, but we feel it. That's pride. But if we've comprehended how that pride works, and then the person comes and praises us, and it doesn't affect us, and we hear the words for what they are, empty boasting, and we don't feel the pride. It doesn't bother us. That's a level of comprehension. But then, when we can pass that same ordeal in our dreams, even in our dreams, we don't fall into the trap, the temptation of that pride. Then we've reached the level of judgment. What about lust? Well, physically, you may be able to, let's say you have a particular person who's drawing your lust. And physically, you might cut the ties. You might stop talking to them. You might stop looking at them. That could all just be repression of the lust. But if you've comprehended it, then you can talk to them, and you don't feel it. The lust isn't there. That's comprehension on that level. But then if you have a dream with that person, and you still don't feel lust, you've gone deeper. You've really comprehended it. then you can judge it. Then that ego can be completely eliminated because there's no consciousness in it. Egos have power over us because part of our consciousness is inside of them. And we feel it is us. That's why we feel that. When we feel our anger, we feel it is me. We feel our pride, we feel it is me because consciousness is trapped in there. But when full comprehension is active, when that full comprehension is there, then that pride comes, we don't feel ourselves in it. Do you grasp that? That pride is there and we don't feel that it is our identity. It is just garbage. That is the judgment. And then the Divine Mother can eliminate it. That is how elimination happens. She can only eliminate it when her child is not in it. We are her child. The Divine Mother, symbolized as Athena or Durga, with her weapons, who will kill the demon, the Medusa, cannot kill it when her child is still inside of it. The child is her consciousness. I had an experience many years ago. I was dealing with a very painful conflict with a close friend. Meditating a lot to try to understand why I was in conflict with this person and suffering a lot from it. And it was my pride. And I meditated and meditated, and I kept trying to understand, and eventually I grasped that it was just my pride, and I needed to just relax and not be so identified with it. And a lot of meditation over many months. And finally, I was still dealing with this person, and I didn't feel the charge that I was feeling before, the conflict in my heart, the pain. Finally, I felt love for my friend again. It was good. And it was then that I had an experience in the internal worlds. And I saw myself, and I saw my friend in a small room, but he was very agitated and upset. And I felt pain because I knew his upset feelings and his agitation were partly because of me, because I was involved in this karmic problem. But I didn't feel that in my experience. And then I turned and I looked to my right and I saw me. But I was on a pier out into the water. And then I was astonished and I saw above that Athena, the Divine Mother, coming from the sky with a big lance. And she killed that me. And it became nothing. That experience showed me very clearly how the process of comprehension, judgment, and elimination works. That elimination only was able to happen because I reached a state of equanimity and a state of peace. And I was restored once again to feeling, the natural friendship that should have been there between my friend and myself. He hadn't reached that stage yet. He was still in conflict. And that's why he was in that little room, which was his mind. He was still trapped in that. But I was outside. And I give thanks for that because I had a lot of help from my Divine Mother to reach that comprehension. This was a little ego. It was a little thing. There's nothing to boast of. I'm not proud of it. I'm grateful because it showed me something so that I can explain how this process works. Quite simply, comprehension, judgment, and elimination all come from sincerity. You can't fake it. If you're boasting, if you're going about proud of being a student, proud of knowing gnosis, you're on the wrong feet. You're on the wrong foundation. True advancement or true understanding of yourself, true liberation from suffering, comes from sincerity. And that's being sincere with others, but also being sincere with yourself. So I'm sorry it was so complicated, but that's more or less what I wanted to talk about. So if you have any questions, let me know. Yes?
As I observe many of my egos, I find them rooted in fear, or fear being the basis for most of them. And I also see fear as being very instinctual, like for survival almost, but survival of what? So could you address that?
Fear is a very powerful and difficult ego to work on. And in my experience, I'd put fear next to lust in terms of the difficulty there is to deal with fear. And the reason is that fear, you can experience fear even in states of consciousness where you've moved beyond the realm of the ego. And that's partly why fear is so difficult to work with, to conquer. And I cited as an example, Samael Aun explained his experience entering the illuminating void. And the only way to enter that experience is if you've access to a state of samadhi, free of ego. Then you go into that level of experiencing the void. But once there, he felt fear. So that fear is something beyond ego, right? Something very deep. That's partly why, to my experience, fear is so hard to work on. And I agree with you. I think in every egotistical situation that I've observed and analyzed in myself, I've always found fear as a component. And that's partly why I, in my personal experience, reject the notion of putting labels on egos. Like saying, well, that ego is pride. We talk that way, but I think in practical experience, you can't do that. Because every ego is an entity that has various characteristics. And a lot of the time, fear is a component. As an example, you state pride, right, or fear or envy. These egos clearly usually have a component of pride or of fear. Partly because when we're disconnected from God, we lose that faith, that connection with God. We feel exposed and open, vulnerable. That's fear. And that stimulates the motor instinctive sexual brain with preservation of life. We feel afraid and want to preserve our life, but it's through the ego, right? And I think it's also true in lust. I think a lot of lust is driven by fear. And it's a longing for connection. Because we're so afraid we're not connected with God, we want to connect with somebody. And it's fear that's pushing us in lust. I think it's common in men and women. To conquer fear, the surest antidote that I have found is prayer. Prayer is an amazing, magical feat. I mean real prayer, not just recitation. But prayer where, with your heart, you call your God, your being, until that connection is established. And really that connection is up to you. Because your Divine Mother, your being is always with you. And if you feel disconnected, it's because of you. God is always there, especially when you're serious about your spiritual work. You're serious because God is pushing you with a spiritual inquietude. That impulse to awaken is your being pushing you. So if you don't feel connected to God, it's because something in you is not connected. It's not God. And I know I've heard so many times, well, God doesn't listen to me and God doesn't talk to me. It isn't that God isn't talking, it's that you're not listening. So prayer, especially the Lord's Prayer, amazing power in that prayer. Or the Gayatri Mantra. Different prayers depending on your background. If you have a relationship with a religion, any religion, there will be a prayer in that religion that will bring you closer to that sense, that feeling, a connection. And that can evaporate fear. Great power in that. So that would be my recommendation. When fear is strong, remember your being. Pray. This especially happens out of the body, in the astral plane. Fear is a huge obstacle. And the surest antidote is prayer. As soon as they feel that fear, you pray to God, please, my mother, my father, whatever prayer you want to use, even if it's just intuitive. Be with me, guide me, help me, show me. And when it's sincere, the fear evaporates. You have another question?
Well, I realize that I need to meditate on fear.
For sure.
But, I mean, right now, the way you talk about fear, sometimes you say it's an ego, but then it seems, it's way deeper than that.
There are egos of fear.
Do the egos bring fear up in order to survive, for their survival?
Fear at its base, to my level of comprehension, which is very shallow, but at its base is a disconnection from the innermost, from God. And that's partly why the Master Samael felt that fear entering the absolute. Because in that state, there's another level of connection that is beyond the connection you get in a regular samadhi. It's something different. And that fear was that change, right? Because you enter into a state of selflessness, the ultimate level, which is a complete level of prajna. It's hard to put in words. So any ego has a reflection of that in the sense that we're disconnected from being. When we're totally enveloped in our pride, running around with our pride, we're boasting and feeding our pride because at the base of it, we're disconnected from God, and that's a fear. We have that lack of faith, lack of connection, so we feel exposed and alone, and the way we want to feel strong and secure is with pride. The real way to do it is to feel God in our heart. Then we don't need pride. When we really have a connection with God, with our innermost, with our Divine Mother, when that's vibrating and living in our heart, pride is completely useless. In fact, it's harmful. And that's why the truest masters are completely humble and absolutely sincere. And they don't care if somebody tries to beef up their pride or tries to bring their pride down, right? Someone who's really centered in God doesn't respond at all to criticism or praise, right? Because they've connected with God in their heart. Likewise, they don't respond to envy or to lust, because all of those are a kind of fear-seeking connection because we don't have the connection with the innermost. It's sort of logical and makes sense, right? Simple. But we forget. So that's why in the course of this process of analyzing body, speech, and mind and acting for the benefit of self and others, we need to remember ourselves. We need to remember our innermost. We need to pray. That's why we have so many aspects of this science that we have to learn. They're all important. And they're all pointing us towards that state of consciousness in which we are awake, we are observant, we're watching ourselves, but we're connected inside our heart. So then, when any ordeal, when any temptation comes at us, we're connected with our innermost. We don't need to fulfill that lust because we have fulfillment in our heart already. We don't need to fulfill that envy. We don't need to listen to that fear. We don't need to follow along with that shame or that gluttony because the fulfillment that we need is already there in our heart with our innermost. We fall into temptation because we've lost that connection. And that connection can be established quickly in us. It's a matter of our own work and sincerity. That connection is built and made very strong through transmutation and through conscious work, through being awake. When we transmute, we're taking those forces, all those, the matter and energy of the sexual matter, and we're creating something. That creation is the connection to God. So if we're not transmuting, if we're not working with our sexual energy, we can't build a strong connection. We'll be very weak as a weak soul. But someone who's created inside, created the astral bodies, awakened the Kundalini, that is a very potent, powerful, direct connection to God. And that's why those people are very strong psychologically and are able to help others in a very strong degree because they have that connection naturally. It's interesting, right? Any other question? Please.
When you were talking about the state of pure perception, which has no body, or you said that there's a sense of indifference in that?
I would say, yeah, I wouldn't say it was necessarily indifference, because indifference could imply lethargy or laziness, right? But I think you're on the right track. I think indifference isn't the right word. I would say it's more like equanimity.
I was wondering how you then would bring the state of compassion or love into it then.
Yeah, because it's not indifference. Some people develop it that way, and it's harmful. And specifically in the Sravakayana path, in the beginning foundational level paths of some traditions, they develop a kind of equanimity that is self-enclosed. And you could call it indifference because they develop the ability, which is a foundational ability, to no matter what arises, they're indifferent. But that isn't a Mahayana manifestation of that conscious state. The full development of that conscious state would be an active engagement that does not get identified. And the difference is subtle. It's a state of engagement, really. It's an equanimity that is active and observant, but it does not get identified. It's a flowing of love, and you could say it like that. It's a force of love and engagement. I don't really have the words for it, but I wouldn't use the word indifference. I think equanimity is a little more accurate, even though some people could interpret equanimity as also indifference, and it isn't that. And like in some meditation schools, they talk about developing meditation in equanimity, but they're really talking about indifference, so that anything that arises, you just don't care. This is wrong. You should care. It's important. Consciousness cares. Really. Consciousness itself is a reflection of Hokmah, right? It's a reflection of God flowing through the Sephiroth. And God cares. God is love. So that conscious state should be a state of caring, a state of engagement, a state in which there is an active observation, but no identification. And it's hard to put it in words, but I think through practice and meditation, you'll get to the point where you realize, oh yeah, I get that. English doesn't have the terms to explain all these states of consciousness. It's just one of the sad facts of English. You have another question or anything? Anything else?
Yeah, question right here.
Please.
Actually, it's just a thank you.
Oh, okay. Well, you're welcome.
Thank you for the practical lecture and all the wisdom, and stay awake.
Okay. I'll do my best. Thank you. So we'll end there. Thank you.
The presentation of this lecture was made possible by donations from listeners like you. Help Gnostic Radio to help others. Make a donation by visiting gnosticradio.org. For questions and deeper understanding of this lecture, we invite you to explore the wide variety of resources available on our websites. Thank you for your support. May all beings be happy.